Hi, this is a little thing that I do every now and then called Beginner's Blooms, where I talk about some of the tools that I use and just do traditional blooms with you. So today I am using JDiction High Gloss Epoxy Resin in the round jugs. You can get it for a really great price on Amazon. It is low viscosity, 1:1. I always use 1 cup and I pour, for this case, I made 10 ounces because I have a couple things I'm doing. I poured 5 ounces A, 5 ounces B, and just used the lines on the cup, which works perfectly. Then I mix it. I like this handheld mixer. It's easy to use. I have problems with my hands. Sometimes they hurt, and stirring it for a long time is tough. Low viscosity resins really don't take much time to mix. And you just mix them till they're completely clear. If using a timer and doing 3 or 4 minutes works for you, do that. But you want to make sure it's clear. You don't see any lines when you move something through your resin. I use these and I put them in this little silicone cup because I can clean the cup and clean this off as soon as everything dries up. I also have a tape measure, which we won't be using today because these are pretty small molds. But when I'm trying to see where my center should go, this is a good tool to let me know where it should go. What else do we have here that we need to talk about now? I get 6-ounce cups from Amazon to use to mix my white. I have little silicone cups that I put 8-inch piping bags in for my white. For blooms, I don't really use this, but if I was using a higher viscosity resin and I wanted my first layer to be bubble free, I might blow it with some hot air. And this is just an off-brand from Amazon, nothing fancy. All right, next, when I'm deciding what alcohol ink colors to use, I'll do a test run on a paper towel. And some people create like charts and stuff. I find they fade, alcohol inks, so they may look different sometimes. So I just like to do this anytime I want to do something and I want my colors to match. Most of the time I wing it. But if I'm not sure, then I might do something like this. I'm going for fall today, and then I line the alcohol inks up in the order so I don't forget. I'm trying to go a little fall today. So it's kind of a tough choice, but I think this orange and this, what is it called? So it's actually apricot and reddish brown. So I think those will be the ones that we use today. I like to have little pieces of paper towel. I like to use these to wipe off my stick that I do my lines with, because if you use a wipe, sometimes it leaves little fuzzy pieces. All right, so let's get everything else out of the way, trying to make my space more user-friendly. All right, and of course, 6-inch sticks to mix my white. Next, for blooms, it's really important that your resin is the right temperature. If it's a low viscosity resin and it's a small item like these little molds here, then you can probably do 34 degrees Celsius. If it's something larger, then you might want to, tailor your resin temperature to what you're working on. Also, I find with thicker viscosity resins, I might use a different temperature, but that's all something you'll kind of learn as you go along. So this resin is at 33 degrees Celsius or 92 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's getting to that perfect temperature for these. You'll also notice this little green thing in the middle that I have here. That lets me know that my table is level. If your table isn't level and you do blooms, they'll float off to the side. And you don't want that. All right, so let's go ahead and pour about 1 ounce in my cup, maybe just a little bit more because I do have a side project I'm working on. And let's go ahead and get the resin in the molds. You do want a thin layer, not too full and not too little. It's sort of a balancing act. If it's too little, your blooms might feather and separate. If it's too thick, your white might just drop in them, and then it doesn't bloom. So just like temperature, it's figuring everything out with the things that you have. I got these molds off of Temu, and it's funny because you buy 5 at once versus 4, but they're just a cheap little mold, and it's probably a good place to start. These are what I used when I taught my first class on how to do blooms, because they're easy to use. All right, I'm gonna set this to the side. All right, let's make our white. So I use lots of products for white, and you can use anything you want, and they all pretty much have the same thing. You don't want it too bright white opaque. You want it just bordering from like skim milk to that white. So I have a little over an ounce here. I'm using CastinCraft opaque pigment concentrate, and I think because of the amount I have in here, I'm gonna go with 10 drops. The other thing to know is that the more volume you have of your resin, the faster it heats up. So if you want to slow down the heating up of your resin, put it in your molds, put it in smaller cups, and that should help you out. I'm almost there. It comes out in very tiny little drops. All right, that's 10. Let's see what it looks like. These I don't know if I mentioned, but my plan is to make them garden flowers. So I switch out seasonally. I have shepherd's hooks in my yard, and I switch out which ones I put out. And sometimes I take the duds and put them out there, and sometimes I create blooms specifically for my garden. I think we're almost there. Almost. It might be just a little too pale. Let's go with 2 more drops. And you do have to check it every single time. I could say 8 to 10 drops, an ounce, but one day it's just going to come out funny. And it's not going to be the right color, and you are going to have to add more drops. It's best to go with the least amount that you think you'll need. You can always add more, you can't take away. I love lower viscosity resins because I tend to stir very fast, which can introduce bubbles. But in a lower viscosity resin, you don't really have that problem. I think that worked out well. Made me feel better, even if it didn't change the color that much, but it made me feel a little better, and that's what matters. Let's go ahead and get it in our piping bag. All right, so we talked about our colors. I'm using Let's Resin alcohol inks, apricot and reddish brown. Now, if your resin thickens a lot, sometimes your alcohol ink will have a hard time moving in it, and it's because it may have a higher ink content. If you're always using a thicker resin, you may want to consider purchasing alcohol inks called Decorum, and they are on Amazon, but they tend to spread better in higher viscosity resins or thicker resins. And I keep them over on my shelf just in case I need them. Because sometimes I'm not paying attention and my resin heats up more than expected, and I need to use a little bit alcohol intense alcohol ink. Oops, double dropped that one. All right. Now, let's take our bag out. If you've ever done pastries or cake decorating, it's exactly like that. Just give it a little spin. Oh, and the other tool, you'll need scissors. Cut a little tip off the bag. You can, when I first started teaching this, we poured from cups because some people just are not great with piping bags. And it's just a stumbling block till they learn that they're very easy to use. But you can pour from a cup. You just have to be very careful, because if you put too much in any spot, that's where the dreaded blobbies or those solid whites spots come from. So the key is to make sure you don't pour too much resin in one spot. The other thing is you don't want to be too stingy with your white. You don't want your lines to be too thin because then there's not enough white to spread. All right, let's go. Like I said, we're doing traditional. And that starts with the spiral. Oops. And you'll notice I am not perfect. I have the worst time going in circles or drawing straight lines or any of that stuff. Sometimes you need to wipe it before you move to the next one so you don't get a big drop when you move to the next one. If you have a thicker viscosity resin, you really need to make sure the bubbles are gone before you pipe on your white, because it can destroy your white with little bubbles that pop up, and then you won't have a consistent line. There's a big, it's a good thing we're doing centers today, because look at that blob. Things happen. Happy little accidents, right? All right. So the white is in these. I like to either use the end of a paintbrush or a dotting tool to draw my lines. And like I mentioned, I like to use a paper towel to wipe it. The reason you wipe it between each line is so that you don't carry the color to your next one. So like I said, simple blooms today, just the traditional pulls in. I don't like to mess around in the center too much because then it dilutes your white. On my last pull all the way in, I like to do my spiral. One time around, not very big. I am anti-big centers. If I have a big center, if you see I've done a big center, it lets you know that I've done something wrong because I needed to do a big center to fix it. Now, you have the option to pull all the way back out, but like I said, I don't like going back into the center. So on my outside pulls, I may not go all the way into the center. Do what you want to do with your blooms. Make them yours. I also don't like to pull all the way up. I used to pull all the way out. But then you get this line that comes all the way out. Not a fan of that either. But you do you. All right, next one. Ends. Last one in, one around. Then I'm just going to do some little bitty outs. See a little bit of something here in my mold, grab that. All right, next. You can save blobbies by pulling them. Remember how I said it'll get thinner if you mess around with it? You can go in and spread that out. This one I don't have to worry about that because I'm doing centers. Also, be sure to just drape the tool through it. You don't want to touch the bottom of the mold because you could be scraping the mold. Again, do what you want with your lines. I like to do squiggle lines a lot, where I just squiggle the tool. All right, last one. And you could see we're already blooming in some of these. Because it's taking me forever. Last one in, swirl, and our little outs. All right. Now, I mentioned we were doing centers, and I pulled a couple of colors out. I wasn't sure what I would want to do. I have this orange, but I think it's too orange. This one I think looks good. And then I have this one, but I think it's maybe too pink. Let me stand up and look at them so I can see where I want to put my centers. I think that one's it, don't you? It's very close though. This would probably look more natural. Let's do more bright and vibrant. Have my little scooper. And you can get these on Amazon too. If you want to see some of the tools I buy, I do have my link to my Amazon storefront, just so you'll know what some of the things I use are called. And I always wish someone had that for me when I started. So many things you need when you start. It's nice to have a little hint. The other spoon that I like are these little bitty spoons, because they have this end that you can use to open tin foil and stuff, so that's really cool. That's my other one I love. Now I just want to push down my centers a little. And like I said, I'm not going to measure these. It's not as important that they're perfect. They're not as big. When the molds are bigger, I have a harder time. And these are outside flowers. They don't have to be perfect. All right, that's it for now. Most likely, since these are going outside, I won't do anything fancy with the backs, but I don't know. I might surprise you. So if I decide to do something different for the backs besides just coloring them, we'll come back for that. Or if I think maybe you want to see me color them, we'll come back for that. In any event, we'll be back. All right, we're back. I backed these with, I poured clear resin first, then I poured this Bushido Brown from Eye Candy mica powder on them to make them crackle just a bit. But I'm not going over that in this video because I figured we would just stick with blooms for this video. I do have lots of videos on crackle. All right, so let's take a look at them. I was looking at them and I thought they were so pretty that I didn't necessarily want them for garden flowers, possibly actually just have them for coasters. I'm hoping the brown was the right color to back them with. We'll see. Oh yeah, look at that. That worked out really pretty. Now a solid color on the back would be fine too, but I just wanted to do this for myself. The crackle always gives a bloom a little something extra. So that's why I like to do crackle backs. I don't know that I should have done it for this video. But I saw these and I thought, wow, I bet they would look really super with crackle backs. Just beautiful. And I'm right, they're probably better as coasters versus garden flowers. So I guess I'm going to be doing some garden flowers today. All right, thanks for watching.